On today's episode of Quest, I'm joined by Elise Avellan. She's an actress, a photographer, a spiritualist, and one of the brightest young thinkers I know. We talk about the illusion of separation and many other things in this double-sized episode. Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hello everyone, I'm your host, Todd Fischer, and this is Quest. For those of you that might be new listeners, let me tell you a little about me. I'm the founder of Metacortex and the author of the best-selling book, Metacortex, The Grand Design. I'm a philosopher, a theorist, a metaphysicist. I'm a perpetual pupil of theology, and I'm an expert in comparative religious study. I've also extensively researched the mind-body connection, anatomy, and physiology. I documented over 300 case studies while researching my book, all from a scientific perspective, with cases that range from near-death and out-of-body experiences to possession to past life experiences, as well as the metaphysical, the paranormal, and other unexplained cases of a spiritual nature. This podcast will bring you some of those astonishing stories, and in some cases by the people that actually lived them. From time to time, I'll be talking about important, perhaps even controversial issues from both spiritual and scientific points of view. The world we live in is ever-changing, and there's often a conflict between spirituality and science, and I wanted to bring you this podcast to balance that equation. It will show you how we know what we know, and there's still so much we don't know. For me, curiosity is part of what makes us human. It's the joy of discovery. It's what drives us. It's our quest. Today I have Elise Avellan with me. We recorded this interview in early June. I was in New York City and she was in Austin, Texas, and we got into a lot of stuff. We talk about her story of coming to America, her experiences in Hollywood, and how she had her moment of spiritual awakening. We also try to process some of the stuff going on in the world today. This was an exciting interview that almost had to be cut into two parts, and I think you'll be seeing her back again on future episodes. We got into a lot of different topics. I will warn you that there are a few F-bombs that were dropped during this episode, especially when the conversation got a little fiery. So settle in for this long interview with Elise. Hope you enjoy it. Hi, Alice. Welcome to the Quest podcast. I'm happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Todd.
This has been a long time coming. We exchange a lot of messages. We talk about so much stuff on Instagram, like constantly. And I'm just like, we got to get on the phone. And you're like, I don't have time for phone. We can't do phone. And now I realize why we should never get on the phone. We'll never have anything else we'll do in the day. We'll just talk constantly.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just keep talking and we'll never get anything done because I think we share some parallel roads in our philosophies on spirituality and religion. And I really like that about you. And certainly you were always at the top of my list to get on the Quest podcast, and we finally were able to make it happen. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to share.
So I want to kind of go back. So I introduced you as Alice Rabbit, which is a name a lot of people know you in your creative world, your creative life. Is you're an excellent photographer and you do so much cool stuff. But I want to go back into kind of your backstory and let people kind of get to know you a little bit more before we get into a spiritual conversation. So why don't you tell everyone kind of where you're from and how you grew up and what got you to America and things like that. So
Well, so my real name is Elise Avellan. I am from Venezuela. I lived there till I was about 16 years old. My twin and I, we were kind of introduced to not really kind of, we're very introduced to the movie industry, to acting through my mother, who was an actress and a model in Venezuela, very well known then, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and ended up here because my father was also in the industry working as a editor with his sister in a lot of the Robert Rodriguez movies. My aunt Elizabeth was married to Robert Rodriguez, and they have like 5 children together, all my cousins. So they, when I was 16, my father was like, come to America and finish high school here. Venezuela was falling apart politically, so it was the first time that we would be living with my father, and it essentially saved our lives. The reason why we are who we are spiritually is because my father plucked us out of the situation we were living in Venezuela, both in a personal level with my mother, who had a very hard time just in general coping with life because she has some mental illness, borderline personality disorder, and narcissism, and the abuse that we underwent with her growing up, but also politically, just like the disempowerment in the country. So when my father plucked us out at 16, it was a huge revolution of our hearts and of our minds, and it just totally rewired our sense of purpose and who we are as individuals. For the first time, my twin sister and I were able to think of ourselves as individuals, because till then we had kind of been a package, and it was to protect us. My mother just seemed like she just didn't want us for us to ever do anything separately, because she was afraid that something would happen to one of us. It's very complex, but it's just a way that she created safety for herself and us. And
Sure.
when we moved to America, it was a culture shock, but it was definitely the thing that if there was something that I was predicting the most in my childhood, even before I met my father, because I met him when I was 8, it was that we were going to live in America. My sister would call it. She would just say it, but we both had a feeling we were going to be here. It was like we knew it. And then when we met my father, found out he was living here, and somehow at 16, we got a phone call after 4 years of not hearing from him. And he was just like begging my mother to let us come live with him. And my mother was like, no, don't call again, And a week later, she was like, okay, take them, And so we came, and first thing my father said was, I'm a movie editor, and he's not doing that anymore, but he was doing it for many years. And he said, you guys have a very known director as an uncle. And so we went to a family gathering, and we met him, and he found out that we were actresses in Venezuela, but we didn't speak very much English then. So he told us like, oh, maybe when you graduate high school and you learn English, you can be in one of my movies. And he just kind of said it in passing. And we were like, oh, cool, whatever. We didn't think anything of it. My sister did take it a little more seriously. She really wanted to act. Acting has always been a thing for my twin sister. It's a way of expression for her. And right now she's getting into directing. And so it was, she really loved that expression. I kind of fell into the system, the industry just because my mother was in it. So we were always kind of on set. If my mother was doing something, we were on set. So, there's on the same studio, there's a baby milk commercial being made. We need babies. So, these 2 babies are adorable. Let's go take them over there. Oh, they're great. Put them in the commercial. It was kind of like that. So it was, I did not think anything of it. It was like my choices when I graduated high school were like, oh, you are going to go to college or you're going to be an actress. And I was like, I don't want to go to college. I was not a good academic in Venezuela because my situation at home. And so I didn't learn how to learn. I wasn't excited to learn academia at all. It was so hard for me to sit and do homework and learn the way that we have been taught in schools. And especially because when I would get home, it was a very abusive home, and it was very disruptive, and it was impossible to get an hour of homework done with my mother losing her mind. So I just was really bad in school. And when I moved to America, I graduated and I was like, I don't want to go to another school institution for the rest of my life. Now I'm like, school is fun,
Yeah. And you moved to America when you were 16.
16, yeah.
15. Okay. Did you live
No,
in
no,
Texas?
16, 1-6. Yeah, 16.
Did you live in Texas?
I did. Yeah, we moved to Dallas for a year and a half. And then my father got a job in Austin and we moved to Austin. And that's where we filmed um, the 3 movies that I was in. I was in another movie that was not directed by Robert, but I was in 3 of Robert's movies. And I was in one of Robert's movies and I thought I was going to be an actress. And then I quit, did another movie in LA when I moved to LA. And I can talk about those movies, but I'll tell them in a second. But then I quit, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then Robert kept on calling me to be in cameos of different movies, and I was like, sure.
Yeah.
You know, he's filming them in Austin. I was living in Austin. I'm like, I definitely can.
Yeah. And most of the stuff you did with him was twin stuff, because it was you and Electra that
Yes,
were both.
he has this thing. You know, Robert. If for anybody watching, if you guys have seen movies made by Robert Rodriguez, he has this like he loves things that can become like a cult, like cult movies. Like he's very kitschy with his choices. They have
Yeah.
to be a little bit they'll grab you and it's kind of like a little bit exploited. Like, you know, he just loves the concept of like twins and twins fighting and being over sexualized. And like it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's just it's an
It's the,
obvious choice, but it's funny and it's a thing that
yeah.
he loves and he does it in all his movies.
It's that drive-in cinema culture and that grindhouse
Yes.
culture that
The grindhouse
existed.
culture.
Because I'm that old, I remember that. So,
Right, the exploitation of sex and violence, which that was my first movie. It's not all the movies he's ever done, but he kind of falls on all of his movies have a little bit of that, yeah, a little bit of those things, the obvious characters, and that fall into archetypes. And that's kind of what he wanted my sister and I to play for his movies, be
yeah.
the sexy, feisty twins. And you know, we didn't care. We didn't care. It was a one-dimensional character. We were like, fuck yeah, we're teenagers. We're being in a movie. We're
Yeah,
sexy. We're fun.
you all became really popular playing those characters. You did. It
We
was like
did.
a crazy amount of fandom around that time frame with those movies, and
Yeah,
really.
and it could have grabbed track if I had cared more to grow that, but you know, it didn't have enough substance for me. My desire to act did not have enough substance for me to care to grow that you know ride that wave.
Did
But
you
yeah, so we were. Go ahead.
did you have a good Hollywood experience?
You know, I had good and bad ones. I I had magical ones that felt very satisfying and self-realizing, you know, what you dream of experiencing. And they were matched almost immediately by by the very things that you hear would happen in Hollywood. And like one of the lightest versions of that I will describe is like, you know, we get invited to go to a red carpet premiere of a movie. And we're invited by people who contact my publicist, and I'm not even paying my publicist. I don't know who the fuck is paying my publicist. I think my aunt was for a while. I don't even know how that worked. I just know that I had a publicist, and I think it was through my agency. I was so young and naive like then. I was the first time that I moved out away from home, like from my father's house. So we were for the first time living as adults in LA, and we were alone, and all of a sudden we're actresses in Hollywood. It was so weird. So we were there and we're invited to this premiere, and I barely have anything to eat on my fridge. Like I don't have anything on my fridge to eat, but then I have to drive for 2 hours to some warehouse area in LA to go to this warehouse to find a Gucci dress I am going to borrow for a premiere that then I'm going to talk about on the red carpet when people are like, what are you wearing? You know, and I'm like, I'm wearing Gucci, you know, and like,
Yeah.
it's like, but then I have nothing to eat on my fridge. And so like, this is so weird. Like the people that are going to see this video of me talking on the red carpet are going to think that I have this like very lavish life in Hollywood, and especially thinking of people in Venezuela, me as a child, and then thinking they would never know that I have an empty fridge and in a tiny apartment in LA, and I don't even know what I'm gonna do. Like, and then tomorrow I have 7 auditions that I might not make. You know,
Yeah.
it was such a black and white experience of experiencing like the idea of this Hollywoodized, the Hollywoodized idea of like you will make it and you're making it, but am I making it? And like when
It's
is
an
making it?
illusion. A lot of it is an illusion. It really is.
Yes, yes. It's just like making movies, you know. You definitely eventually, you know, if you love it and you put up with a lot of shit, you can make it. Just like in any industry, like you can make it and make millions, and then buy yourself some freedom, like privacy and stuff, but then you lose privacy, you know. So there's a give and take to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And you know, and then obviously we know with the Me Too movement and with Harvey Weinstein, and now with with Epstein, we know what was happening in Hollywood. And that's, I had that a direct experience. I was not necessarily, I was targeted by Harvey Weinstein, for example, that the first time I met him on the press junket for Grindhouse, I had a very weird experience with him. We were in the elevator walking in with my publicist and a bunch of other people. And the press junket is inside that that hotel. It was the Four Seasons in LA. And he comes in and he goes, "Oh, you guys are the little whores in the movie, or the little prostitutes in the movie." And we're like, and my sister looks up and she's like, "What? No, we are the babysitters. Get it right." And he was like, "Oh, you have fire mouth. You know what happens to people like you in Hollywood, right?" And my sister just looked at him like, "Say one more thing, bitch. Then say one more thing." You know, it was like, it was really intense in that moment. And I was like, I instantly felt like, whoa, isn't this the producer of our movie? And I was like, all of a sudden I had a big like, okay, if he can just, the moment that he meets me, put me in that place, with no respect for who I am, or even just be like, "Hey, nice to meet you. You guys are Robert Rodriguez's nieces." He knew exactly who we were. He didn't even give a fuck that he made us feel disrespected. My boyfriend was in the elevator with me. It was very interesting. I was like, wow, this guy feels invincible, and he is right now. And without him, I don't have any career. And so I went on to quit. I did not continue, but my sister continued, and she was harassed for 7 years, constantly by Harvey. And it was very, that was the darker part of Hollywood, where like, you're experiencing these amazingly creative, fun moments, and you're meeting amazing people that you looked up to, like meeting Kurt Russell on the set of Death Proof, and having him fall madly in love with me and my sister. Like, he was just like, "You guys are adorable. Oh my God, I just want to hang out with you all night." So we're like hanging out with Kurt Russell all night, and he's like FaceTiming. Not, I don't think he was FaceTime, but it was just a voicemail. Yeah, he was just like calling Goldie Hawn and putting her on speakers so that we could speak to her, and while we were on a lunch. And these are people that I dreamt of meeting when I was a child. And so moments like that were what made Hollywood worth it, and it kept the idea going. But then too many moments of no food in the fridge, and then going to auditions I didn't make because my nose was too big, or because I wasn't nude enough, or because my tits are too small, or all the things that Hollywood had as like the thing that you were supposed to be. Right. Now it's changed, but this was 2007. This is before so much. This is the beginning of the beginning. And
did you have a spiritual life while you were involved in Hollywood stuff, or did that go by the wayside? Where were you at with that? Go ahead.
Good question. I hadn't had my spiritual awakening. Well, I had a weird moment happen to me when I was 17 inside a closet. It was really weird. I had an out-of-body experience inside a closet when I was 17, where I realized that something, for the first time, I felt as an adult, as a thinking, coherent adult, that there was something in the closet with me. Like, there was a presence that made me feel completely loved. I was like changing after high school, and something happened. I think I was in despair, and about some situation. I can't remember what it was. High school girl, like a lot of hormones. And right. Something's happening to me, and then I walk into the closet, and I walk in the closet, and I'm changing, and then I felt like an angel or God was in the closet with me, and it enveloped me so completely. I had not even felt that kind of love from my mother ever in my life. It was like, for the first time, as a sentient being in a biological body, I felt infinite. And I was like, what is happening? What is happening? I melted into the floor. I was like, everything's going to be all right. And that sustained me, but I didn't wonder about it, didn't read any books on anything. I had rejected Catholicism since I had left Venezuela. So I didn't even do anything about it until I was about 22, which is when I had a radical spiritual awakening. And that I had left Hollywood by then. I left Hollywood when I was the week before I turned 21.
Nice. So you did grow up in organized religion in Venezuela. Were you baptized Catholic?
I did. I was baptized Catholic when I was, I don't know, 2, and then or maybe 1.5. Yeah, 1.5. And I was also baptized in Dallas because my father was dating a woman who was very strong Christian Baptist, and she wanted us to get baptized in Prestonwood Church, her church. It's like those 7,000 people churches that get filmed and they get broadcast on TV. It was really weird. And she was like, you guys have to get baptized again. Like, this has to be your individual choice. Otherwise, your father and I cannot, get married. I'm like, what? So we just did it for, to placate her desire. But it was not something that I understood as like going through this ritual makes me feel closer to God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Were you a confirmed Catholic? Did you go through the whole process, or was it just
totally, completely? Like, like the whole, like we got baptized and we went to the first communion, like the whole thing. We had to do all the rituals through our school system because we went to private school our whole lives in Venezuela, and they were all Catholic, except for our last year. We went to a music school, and there was not really anything religious about it.
I see. Do you consider yourself a Catholic today?
No, I don't. I believe in Christ, and I don't necessarily consider myself a Christian either. But I do believe, and I do believe, but I do believe in like Mother Mary and like these beings, these people who existed and had a lot of spiritual knowledge and influence on us. I do believe that there is this power to these beings and their energy and who we pray to. But I don't necessarily consider myself anything like that.
Gotcha. Okay. One of the things, so what I want to move to, now that kind of people are up on where you've come from and what you're about, I think that these things are fascinating for people to know because it really points you to the place you're at today with your spirituality. And I see a lot of people like this, like your life, your experiences growing up have to shape what you become later on. And you've become, in the last few years, you've really become wise to a lot of things, and you're sharing your experiences. And I think I
love it because we've been connected for a few years. So you've seen a little bit of that, if you could say, coming out of the closet in my spirituality, like really kind of stepping into my power in my voice.
Yeah, I've been your biggest cheerleader. I like to call myself your biggest cheerleader because I don't feel like you're talking enough to people.
I love it. Thank you.
And I'm just like, you've got to keep putting that message out there because I can see it's always interesting to me, particularly when I talk to Christians or specifically Catholics in the business. There aren't a lot of people that like to wear religion on their sleeve in Hollywood. They just don't.
Yes, I think it's because it's a fear that it'll be like the people will shut them down,
Yeah, I mean, what's really weird to me is that there are a lot of people that closet things that they are in Hollywood for the sake of not losing a paycheck or having a rebellion from the fans. There's a lot of people that keep things deep inside them when maybe they need to let these things out. And I think there's actually deeper identity issues that people have that would be healthier to actually bring out in front of the public and take your chances with that.
I completely agree.
Versus wearing a cross around your neck and being proud that you're a Christian. Like that doesn't seem like a really deep thing you should hide. I mean, I could be completely off base on this, but
no, I don't think you are. I think that it touches on very deep rooted fears of our past, of how we know people have been prosecuted, and who knows, like, one of the topics that I bring up sometimes when I talk about these things is I honestly, I believe in reincarnation. And if reincarnation is real, then then we have in some soul memory that we cannot explain yet, all the ways that we have either been the victimizer or the victimized by our religious beliefs. You know, we have persecuted each other and been persecuted for believing in certain things throughout history. And I feel like we have these traumas. And if it's not because of incarnation, it's definitely because of what we have read in books and understood could happen or has happened to our ancestors, our past. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that what Hollywood does with religion is they just make it trendy. You know, it's like Madonna follows the Kabbalah and it becomes the thing everyone wants to go to. Or
Right.
Richard Gere is out and he just wears Buddhism on his sleeve, and it's like
It becomes this thing that we want
yeah, they
want
become
to practice, like a
these
brand.
these pockets of things that happen,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of just something that's kind of always there for people, it just becomes the thing of the month that you are, and it's
Right.
it's kind of unfortunate in that way. But I see more people, wanting to not be afraid to say that they're Jewish or say that they follow a Buddhist philosophy. You know, it's a super slow transition to that.
Yes.
But
To
people are
owning.
people are so picky about their images in this business. It's always fascinating to me, and this is a little off topic, but I'll use this as an example. It's like when musicians get political, and then they don't understand the backlash, because I think a lot of people in entertainment, the reason why you like someone in entertainment, look, I go see a Tom Cruise movie because I like his movies. He's an interesting personality. He does action. I like the band U2 and their music, and I've grown up with it. But when people get political, what they don't get is that all their fan base like them for their music, right? But once you start to
Right.
talk about something else, you now divide your audience. But the celebrity can't see beyond why you don't see their vision, because they can't see you as just someone who only likes them for music,
Yeah.
And that's the rub, is that,
We
I'm
like to
not saying,
compartmentalize things. It's almost like it's safer for us if we compartmentalize, but we do not. It doesn't feel good to compartmentalize ourselves.
yeah.
We don't like when
And,
somebody puts us in a box, but we put
and,
everything else in a box.
and I think that any entertainer, anyone in the public eye, they should have the right to talk about whatever they want. They can preach from a stump in the woods. I don't care what they say or do, but they have to know they're taking a risk. And if they don't think there's a risk involved in that, then they're stupid, really, in a way.
And they are, and that's why, and people in Hollywood are so careful about sharing, even if their sexuality, not even about religion, but sexuality. Like my friend
Yeah.
Colton, he was my roommate in LA, and Colton Haynes, he's a very famous actor now.
Yeah.
He came out of the closet, I don't remember how many years after I moved out of LA away, but it was so hard for him. I remember when we were living with him, it was like, he would pretend that he was dating my sister for a long time when we were in red carpets and stuff, so that he would, because that's how he got in. He got in with his gorgeous face and very like manly attitude. And it wasn't until after, I don't remember what show, he ended up having to come out, because it's like, oh my God, like,
It was Arrow.
clearly.
He was on
Yeah.
Arrow when he did that.
Yeah, I think it was Arrow when he came out. And it was like, wow, all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, thank goodness, and how much freedom it is for him and for everybody else. But what happens is this, and this happens often. Okay, if you are a leading man, okay, we've treated Hollywood, if you think about what it is, like the stories we've been telling are heterosexual love between men and women stories, and those were the major archetypes that told stories. Like all of a sudden started including gays, and then trans, and all the other things that we are as a society and humanity now lately. But till very recently, the archetypes, if you didn't fall into one of them, en masse, the whole of the world and our consciousness and our awareness about that existing, like that many gays existing, lesbian love, like whatever, it was like a shock. It's like, even if you were a lesbian yourself, if you saw that on TV, you would be shocked. So like, if you were to find out that your favorite character, your favorite actor is gay, you all of a sudden can't unsee it. It's like, oh, you oh, you like to have sex with men, but I want to have sex with you. And like, yeah, Tom Cruise, let's just say, talk about Tom Cruise. If Tom Cruise all of a sudden came out as gay, it was like, oh shit, like, can I still see you as the man that is in these beautiful romantic movies as some heterosexual man? It's really hard for people to continue seeing their desired picture.
The consumer is the one that, you know, can't unsee that or can't unhear that,
and so they could lose
what that does
ratings.
is it hurts their roles. Yeah, it hurts 50% of your work might get pulled away because you come out or you talk about a particular philosophy, whatever it is that you start to talk about. And it's crazy.
And instead of saying to the people, I mean, if I'm gay, you know, if an actor is gay and he wants to be able to be gay, I mean, clearly he's not the only gay person in the world. There should be stories about gay love, you know? So it's like, it seems obvious when we were told as actors, young actors, no, you can't act like that. You need to act like this because that's what the stories that should be told. It's like, no, if I exist, then those stories need to be told. And, you know, people like me need to hear their story. Only heterosexual lovers between men and women are not the only people existing in the world. Then that was the whole point. It was like, in the end, there was like a very specific formula that has now expanded and is showing us, as we can clearly see with these riots, where all our mess is with the Black Lives Matter and you know, this quarantine, everything that has happened so far in the earth is just a consequence of where we were before. And we're just now we're waking up. And this goes back to our topic, the illusion of separation. We are so convinced that we're separate, that our skin color is separate. My God, just the moment your skin goes away, you have everything else. Past that layer, everything else is the exact same inside of our bodies.
Yes. We're going to talk about the illusion of separation. I want to move in. That was the big topic we're going to get into on this episode. I will just interject one thing real quick before we get into that. And I talk about this in my Metacomics book, is really, and then maybe we can use this as a setup to go into this, but I talk about how in America anyways, and it's very much like this around the world, we're all kind of part of a system of control. We're kind of indoctrinated into this and people don't even realize that they're in it. But what it is, it's a very specific way to control people and to separate people. And I'm going to give you an example. So bear with me because this is going to take a minute. But so when you grow up in a certain economic level. Your parents are making a certain amount of money. So let's just say you grow up middle class. You grow up in a subdivision. You're probably in an all-white neighborhood or all-black neighborhood. That is indicative of how you're growing up. Mm-hmm. You hear your parents talk about being Republicans or Democrats, and kind of by default, you follow what your parents do for a while, right?
Mm-hmm. Until you can question it yourself, yeah.
You grow up in a certain educational system, so you're getting a certain level of education. This is going, and all these situations I'm talking about are different with different groups. So there's division happening here, right? By default, we're being divided. Obviously, you're growing up with a color of skin, which is important. And also you're growing up in religion. Did you have a choice to be baptized in a Catholic church? Nope.
I did.
You were completely indoctrinated into it right from the beginning. So you have all this stuff already in your system. And then you get into high school and you start to hear about how you're supposed to get married to your high school sweetheart. You're supposed to get married in a church, which is expensive. You're supposed to wear white at your wedding. You're supposed to go to college.
All these fucking things.
So you go to college and you have to get a 30-year loan to pay for your college, which may guarantee you a middle-class life. You might become a mechanical engineer from Purdue, right? And get a decent level of income, but you're still only really upper middle class at best, right? Mm-hmm. And in high school, you drove, a beat up Ford, and now you're driving, maybe a nice Honda, like that's your life, right? You've upgraded a little, So when you're 16, you get your driver's license, you get your first car, and guess what comes with the car? Maintenance, insurance, fuel, right? All these things that you have to do and have. So let's say you wind up marrying your high school sweetheart. you've got credit cards, you have 2 kids, you get a home with a 30-year mortgage. So now you've got your college loans and your 30-year mortgage. You have trouble with your husband, you have trouble with your kids. You're in a job where you work 9 to 5 every day. You can't wait for the 2 weeks of vacation you get every year, and everyone goes to the same stupid places, right? At least in the Midwest, you know, the Southeast, that part of the country, you're either going to Disney World or you're going to Myrtle Beach. Of all the beaches you can pick, why do you pick Myrtle Beach of all the beaches, right? Or you're going out to getting a chalet in Gatlinburg, you go to the Smoky Mountain. It's always the same couple locations. It's like no one really goes out and does, and you do it to decompress so you can come back and plug into your job again. And here's the rub with the job. The first job you score out of college is not going to be the one you retire from. You're going to probably quit that job and start another job where you start from the beginning. And then that company you stay with for 5 years when they decide to shut down. And then you're looking for a third job someplace else. And in that job where you've started from scratch again, is the one you're going to stay at until you retire. This is most people's lives. Okay?
I know you talking about it. It makes me feel like the weight, like, oh my God, just thinking about that. I was like, no.
That is the matrix. That's really what it is.
Exactly.
And people, they don't even know it, but they're in it. But once you witness that you're in it, you can break it. And that's the key to people really getting their spirituality back and really changing their lives. Because let me tell you something. And here's one of the reasons why you and your twin were so popular in the movie business is that people work these jobs, they come home, they eat dinner, and then what do? They got to sink themselves into their favorite TV show. They watch a movie. They go to Redbox and get a DVD. They play video games. They read books. Some people go out and drink. Some people go gamble. Why do they do it? To forget about their problems, because their lives aren't that great. I was listening to my friend of mine is Dr. Drew Pinsky, and he was listening. I was listening to one of his podcasts the other day, and he was talking about how today the term is ordinary misery. People live in the psychological community.
Oh my God, I completely agree with you.
Ordinary misery is what people live in with moments of happiness.
Yes.
That's what it is. People live in ordinary misery. That's the baseline standard for people today. And that's unfortunate. So people watch movies. So they watch
so they can fantasize, they can feel alive, they can feel things beyond their lives.
They don't want to think about their problems. And that's why, and all that, and that's what I love about Hollywood, is that it is actually, even though there's such a dirty, it's just an awful business, it provides a good and decent public service, you know, because if we took away all the entertainment, they're shooting themselves because if there was nothing to think to, you know, to forget about your problems, people would go crazy. So
well, yes and no, because that's the thing. I think that there's a big divide there. I think that disconnecting from your problem, yes, we need to be able to get away from our problems, but what we are not doing is we're not tapping in enough to change it. So when we're grinding and then sitting in front of the TV, we are not serving ourselves enough to, like, what we need is to disconnect completely and ask ourselves is what we're doing actually makes us happy. But people don't even understand how to ask themselves that question, or we're beginning to, but in general, en masse, people do not ask themselves, is this life fulfilling to me? Like, is everything that I've set up myself to exist in fulfilling to me? And am I worthy of that question? Because most people feel very unworthy in life. You know, people have such a bad, anytime that I ask anybody, do you love yourself? People have such a guilt-ridden answer, and most people have guilt-ridden answers. Like they don't want to say they love themselves, even though they do. It's like there's a whole new conversation of the yogi world and the Instagram world of like, love yourself. And it's true. Like, we want to be able to joke about it or normalize it, because most of us feel like we need to put ourselves down, like we don't deserve enough. And unless you feel like you are deserving of your desires, of a meaningful, slower, exciting life, you're not going to live it. You're literally going to grind and then watch TV until you go to bed, until you die, you know?
Yeah. It's kind of a worker bee public. And that's the system of control. And I almost daily tell people that same story that I just told you, because I always get the same reaction. People don't really realize it until they hear it or they read it and they go, wow, I'm in that system. Almost every one of those things he said, I'm plugged into. And then you can make the conscious choice to begin to unplug from that. And you can start to sort things out and see that there's other ways and there's other solutions. And I don't know if that was the best segue into the illusion of separation.
No, that was,
but,
I think it is. I think it is, because it is part of what, I think about, like, you were in the movie The Matrix. Like, you were part of that crew, right? You worked on it.
Yeah.
You gravitated
I guess
towards
I could talk
that.
about that on here.
Yes, and
you made me violate my my not confidentiality.
Not talking about yourself.
Thanks.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. So yeah, but it's interesting, because when we think about what we gravitate towards, for any reason, even before we wake up out of the Matrix, we are already, our souls are guiding us to waking up. And we're either numbing out and not reading the signs, and then all of a sudden you finally wake up, and then you see that the signs were everywhere. Do you see all the signs that, hopefully you see all the signs that ever knocked on your door to wake up? Could have been through dreams or synchronicities in your life, that your soul was just screaming at you, like, wake up, get out of this. This is not why you're existing. You're existing to find who you are, not to grind and barely pay rent and with a low grade life. And, no.
And your idea of the illusion of separation is that your interest is in how it happens, how it manifests. And then, your thing is how people can make small changes to reconnect with that truth. And that in the truth, I should say, that we're deeply connected,
that we're all deeply connected to each other, to nature, and to the space in between. We are everything. Like, the very thing that I can honestly say, and I know it's hard to say this to those who are listening who have never experienced, like, let's say, a psychedelic experience or even an out-of-body experience. But for example, when I smoked DMT, and I smoked twice, the first was like a shock. It was like, oh my God, what the fuck, where am I going? You go through a tunnel of light, very similar to dying. And DMT releases in your brain when you are born and when you die, and a little bit through orgasms and when you get really excited. But it's mostly when you die and when you are born. And it makes you go through the vacuum of color, like this tunnel. And I did, and it was profound. And then I arrived at a place that was made out of perfect geometric shapes and colors, and colors I cannot describe. And it was infinite. It was constantly moving, and it showed me that I was made out of the same fabric of everything else. It was like when Neo becomes everything and he realizes that he is the Matrix. It was like that. Like, everything was ones and zeros, and green ones and zeros. It was like that. It was like, oh no, I am the bullets. I am the space in between. I am the agents that are trying to kill me. Everything, it's me. I can manipulate anything. That knowledge, once you have a glimpse of that, which I've had twice, very real, just on DMT. I've had other experiences. I cannot ever undo that. I broke my own matrix. And so now I can make more well-informed decisions when it comes to my emotional triggers of separation.
Yeah.
And so when someone triggers me, whether it's a family member or a riot on TV or an injustice, because I am all about justice, I can quickly put myself in the place of compassion towards the wrongdoers and understand the bigger picture, because I understand that I am one with everything. And that is a very general thing to say, because, oh, we're all one. It sounds so cozy. I'm like, oh, we're all one. But actually we are. And that is what we're trying to figure out, why we exist in biology. We live in different bodies so that we can come back to that realization in biology. That's what the whole concept of ascension is. What Christ was doing, he realized he was God in his body. Because once you die, you go back to source. And that's has been the experience of when people die and tell the stories, when they come back, they don't die, they come back after death. And near-death experiences, they always talk about this. It's like, oh, I arrived at a place that was heavenly, and I was, realized that everything was oneness. And it's like, okay, so once you die, you leave the body that made you convinced that you only begin and end inside of your body. And And so you don't have a nervous system attached that lets you know that something is painful anymore. You feel completely unlimited in whatever you want to experience. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, the only thing that makes you feel separate is that you come to exist in a body that attaches itself to identity, to the identity that it is in that life. Which is, if we didn't have that, we would not commit to the stories we came to live as strongly as we do. If we knew that dying was like an exit point, like graduating, we would all be killing ourselves, because life is hard and living in a body is painful, and all our necessities are very painful. I mean, if you don't have a fucking toilet to shit, if you need to shit, that's going to be painful to your body. If you're hungry and you can't eat, that's painful. If you want to fuck and you can't come, like, that's fucking painful. And all these things are necessities to the human body that keep us feeling very separate from one another. Because I can be having my own personal, very painful experience, and you're in front of me, and let's say you're hungry and you're eating, and I'm hungry and I'm not eating. And so you don't know that I'm hungry. You cannot feel my hunger. And that is what we came to do here. We came to remember, in a way. That's what my belief. I want to say that. It's my belief that we came to remember our oneness by being in different bodies and working together through our illusion of separation and the free will that it takes to choose to come back together. Because it's not free will if you already are connected to everything, you have access to all the knowledge and power that it is to be one with God. There is no free will there. You already know. So there's no doing, there's no self-realization, there's no forgetting. You need to forget to go back through your own choices to the oneness. And that is the most powerful self-realization experience of existing. It is to choose out of the confusion and illusion to do little things that all of a sudden give you glimpses of the oneness until you break your own matrix and you become one with God. And that is what happened, what I believe happened to Jesus and to the Buddha and to many different messiahs and teachers that have lived in our life. And it's happening currently to many, many new younger generations who are having out-of-body experiences, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's interesting because if you go back to the Jesus narrative, or you talk about Krishna or Buddha or whatever you want to, whoever you want to talk about, Muhammad or whatever religious figure that walked the earth, it's interesting because there were systems of control within all those governments in those countries. And I think that it may not be as much of an intricate system of control or a matrix as we have today, but it was still there. And I think those were all things that suppressed having the realization that you were connected to something different. It was almost beat out of people in a way.
I mean, when we call the Dark Ages, I didn't know this. I did not know this, but the Dark Ages represent when the church decided that, and government decided that everything that you did outside of the church that seemed remotely witchy or ritualistic, that was outside of Christianity or whatever religion they wanted, then you would be outcast or killed. And all information outside of what they wanted you to believe you would be prosecuted for it. And that became the Dark Ages of humanity, where we were separated from our own individual seeking of God, and which you could tap into through meditation or even through sickness. A lot of people, I have had very powerful out-of-body experiences through having like delirium and fevers and have had very like spiritual connections with, you know, communication with what I would call my angels through being very sick. And so even those things, like if you talked about it during the Dark Ages, you might be deemed, you know, the devil and get burnt. And so in a way, like if you think about back, you know, Greek times, we've had different stages of very open minds and how we approached our concept of God, or even sexuality, and how we approached the pursuit of God or the pursuit of understanding of more or gods. And then it just started becoming compartmentalized and manipulated by governments and masses. I mean, even the Jesus story, like the book, the Bible, was written so many years after, and it was totally taken by Constantine, and it became this thing that was so like the church, you know, not individual ritualistic groups who were meeting and practicing ritual of connection and beckoning Jesus, or like, it just became this thing where like you needed to pursue it like this, and there was all these rules around it. You need to do these things. You need to pray 1,000, I don't know, how do you say it in English, like the prayers in Catholicism were like,
Yeah.
if you say your sins, and they were like, okay, you
Yeah.
have to pray this 10 times and that 5 times. I'm like, what is that really gonna clean my sins? And is that
Yeah.
really gonna make me feel closer? It was so confusing. And that's how we've been manipulated out of our own personal individual experience of connecting to the oneness.
I want to ask you, so how does humanity get saved at this point? So in my Metatomics book, the last 2 chapters are really really interesting in my book, because the second to last chapter is where we're at now in the world, which is not a great place. And I talk about all the awful things that we've done to the planet and all the awful things we've done to the human race, and just kind of how screwed up things are. And I paint a very bleak picture. And if I'm being honest, I don't think the human race has 100 years left in it. And I think 30 years from now, things are going to be really bad. It's going to be a bad place to live without a really intense fixing of problems, right?
Something big, yeah.
So even though I end my book on a positive message on why we need to fix things, it's such a vast problem. I don't know if it's fixable. So I want to pose the question to you: how do people have a collective awakening? Is it going to take a massive miracle? Is it just an information campaign? How does Elise reach people, or and deliver a message? Or what does it just going to take a personal experience, an aha moment? What's your best guess for the future?
I think it's a combination of more people having these out-of-body experiences and having the guts to share them, and giving that permission to others to have it. I think more and more people are wanting to have their own, this is what I call their own cosmic experience of the oneness. Like, Moses saw a burning bush, lived to tell about it, and it became a whole religion. And so, like the same, we've all been telling stories of somebody else's experience of their conversation with God. And what will save us and is our realization that God is in each and every one of us. And I sound like Jesus now, but it's an interesting thing, because there's no one coming to save us. Well, there's help. There's a lot of help we're gonna get, and there's a help that we can get, and that we can give each other. For example, George Floyd, the day he was dying, those 8 minutes he was dying, and he did not know he was going to become a huge catalyst for change. And we will never be the same. The world will not be the same. Now, it was like the Me Too movement. No industry can ever get away with sexual harassment ever again because of the Me Too movement. Now, people will get fired for doing the things that Harvey Weinstein was doing, and and if anybody raises a flag on sexual harassment in any industry now, because it's not a worldwide kind of like baseline now. It's like, you will not do this. If you do this, you are out. This is now worldly recognized. But you did that 60 years ago, and they would have laughed at you and told you to get in your place and push your boobs up. That's the same with the Black movement. It's a baseline now, and thanks to George Floyd, it's a baseline. Maybe Martin Luther King wanted to make it into a movement, and it was, but it wasn't enough. It was like trickles. Now it's like, I think that the next big thing is continuing the information and continuing giving permission to the individual to go outside of their everyday grind to find their own cosmic experience of God. And like, go do anything that breaks your matrix, and you will never be the same. You will not fall for the things. You will not give up your life the way you give it up every day.
I heard an interesting analogy about the George Floyd incident. And and I don't want to get too far into current events, because I never even know when these podcasts are going to air. And I try not to take it too political as much as I just like to stay on the spiritual side. But the yogi that I have been learning yoga with put it this way. They said that, you know, obviously, I think in this world, especially if you believe in the idea of angels and how the angels are there to assist people and how fallen angels are there to take people in a different direction or to do, you know, the wrong things or bad things. So this yogi says that it's possible that either the police officer or George Floyd may have entered into a contract of some means. And this spiritual contract would create this system of change. So either George Floyd entered into a spiritual contract to be sacrificial, or the cop entered into a spiritual contract with the other side to be the person that would kill a person that would make a movement. So I write in my book about alignments and the 9 alignments in which people are, from lawful good to chaotic evil, and that alignments, whether you're good or evil, is always subject to perception. And many people change their alignments during their life, and you can move between things. And it's very interesting because someone can be lawful, incredibly lawful, yet be evil. So it's an interesting dynamic in how people's alignments can create part of their identity. And no one really is sure whether you're born with these alignments or they're presented to you later, or it's your own view on the topic. But it's interesting. And I'm not trying to turn that cop into a hero, but
no, but I think this is a very controversial topic, because I do believe, and this is my personal belief and out of my own research, that it is a little bit more like that than we think. And that is our next level of personal responsibility and understanding in the world. But we're not there yet. We're still fighting about black and white, you know, and, you know, in Republican and Democrat, and look who's president, you know, we're still like in preschool when it comes to being humans and understanding who we are and what we are. But I do think that even though this topic is super controversial, and I do, you know, I'm all about it, like Black Lives Matter. Yes, they do. You know, like they don't only matter, they are cherished, they are needed. You know, every single living creature, every single thing that exists and is sentient, and even if it isn't sentient, it exists and is needed, you know? Now, I doesn't need my validation for it to exist. I just need to be conscious enough to respect it. And if I am not, it's because I don't feel respected and I am very desperate. And that is the check-in. And that is not, there's not enough of that. The people who are the presidents, the ruling and the system, the people who are trying to be the leaders are mostly comprised of people who are very scared, desperate people who are convinced of outside enemies, instead of convinced that there are friends everywhere and there are community everywhere that we can be a part of, because that changes the paradigm. And, you know, I do think that, in my personal belief, because of the research that I've done and all the things that I'm into and have gathered, I do believe that there's more to consider on the idea that every single person that dies, every single life that ends, that was not unknown to that life. I think that there is a part of us that we call our higher selves that is very aware of what the potential exit points are in our lives. And this is something that I got told by a medium, and several channelers and mediums in my research talk about the exact same thing. And they get this information from the other side of the veil. And the information goes, every single person has about 4 to 5 exit points in their life. And when you are choosing your karma wheel, when you have to come and like, you have your specific appointments. And so depending on what appointment goes down and what you do, what you end up reacting like in that appointment, let's say you get raped or you're going to get raped, right? Someone's going to rape you, and you, depending on your interaction with that person, the rape happens, or you kill them, or they have a come to Jesus moment with you before they rape you because of the way that you acknowledge them. And that changes the rest of appointments you might have in that lifetime. But so all those things, you might have some things set up in your lifetime for that to happen, like appointments, cosmic appointments, but not everything is written, but just some appointments. And your exit points, where just potential deaths, are marked, and your higher self knows it as a as a way out, because I don't think that if I believe in reincarnation. So if I am this unlimited being before I come here, and I'm signing up to come here, and I choose my mother and I choose my situation, and know I have this potential terrifying and exciting appointments that I'm going to live through to remember who I am in God. I feel if I would not say yes to coming here, if I wasn't absolutely guaranteed that I'm going to get the fuck out, because I'm going to go back to source. And if I knew that, I would have left a long time ago. That's what I was saying earlier, because it is so hard to commit to this life, because it's so painful to live in our bodies. And so it's so hard to forget that we are actually a part of source. It's so hard to be here and be so much in pain. And actually, one of my spiritual teachers told me, sleeping is not a rest of the body. It's a rest for the soul to get a break from the body, because it's the only time that it gets a break from the separation, and it has to happen every night. And it's like, whoa, I never thought of it that way until they told me, you know?
I get into this more in my next book. I don't want to spoil my next book too much, but
next book.
The next book, yeah. So where the first book, where Metacortex, the Grand Design, was about God's plan, the second book is actually a much more, it has much more of an individual approach. And what it does is it's made for the human being. And what you have to do is it's a book about making yourself the best version of you can be. And really what it is it's about your physiological attunement and how to get yourself attuned to having the best physical body you can have, so you can do the mental work after that. And your mental attunement is the next phase of it. Because what I look at it as is, the soul is the operator of a mechanism, which is the body. So the body is there, the mechanism is there to protect the operator. That's the point, but they have to work together. And that's the problem with a lot of people, is that they're separated. They're not getting it to all function together, and it affects a lot of your life. And you can never really tune into the real powers that the human being can have without getting all of that in balance. Because the operator is going to leave that body, and that body is going to turn into ash, and that operator is going to go back up into the guff and recycle back down into another body. Because I believe in the reincarnation element like you do. I call it something different in Metacortex. But it is based on a lot of religious theory. And it's very interesting, because even in Christianity, there's a veiled conversation, and a lot of religious scholars will back this up, and that they're guesting on my podcast in future episodes, that reincarnation was within the Christian Christian church.
The conversation at some point it ended, and that's very interesting.
What wound up happening was it was actually something that started to change on local levels, where the priest would. So the thing about the Catholic Church, what people don't understand about the Catholic Church, which is different from other Christian faiths, is that every Sunday, no matter where you go, the same church is teaching the same thing. It comes down from the top. The Vatican tells everyone what you're teaching on Sunday. It's a curriculum in a way. So wherever you're at in the country, you can pop into a Catholic church and get what you would have gotten in your hometown. That's what I love about the organization of the Catholic Church, where other Christian denominations may do whatever they want to do. And but the interesting thing is, it came down to really how ministers and reverends and priests started delivering things, that it became less of a you're going to go to heaven and then come back down in a new body, as it was like just a duality. You're going to go to heaven or hell. And what that really means is hell is the absence of God. Okay.
Exactly.
So if you aren't living your life like you're supposed to, which is a Buddhist philosophy and a principle,
right,
you have to keep coming back and live your life until you've done it right. And then you don't have to come back anymore. Hell is earth. And you keep coming back and recycling back to earth with that same soul and living it again until you get it right and you're earned worthy. So that's the little fragment that the Christians have taken out. I love it. So heaven and hell, it's still there. It's just, it's a veil, you know?
It's a veil. It's an understanding. It's like if you are disconnected from source, you are making a a fully informed decision about who you are, because you are, whether you like it or not, are fully connected and going back to source. But when you're here, you can choose to not be tapped in,
Yeah.
or by circumstance, you are not tapped in. Let's say because you don't have a very healthy diet, or you're going through really shitty things and your parents didn't know how to introduce you to the concept of seeking God, and you just have no way of listening to your soul, and you live a low grade life. You have a
Yeah.
very low vibration, you have no opportunity, and there's just no time or way that you can tap in unless something miraculous happened, like an accident that breaks your matrix.
Right.
Or because that's usually what happens. You have a near-death experience out of desperation, you try to commit suicide, and all of a sudden it's like your angel's in the room and it's like, guess what, you ain't gonna die, you have to come back and you're gonna do it all over again. It's like, okay, like now all of a sudden you're like, wait, you're real? Like, I get
Yeah.
to not die right now, and I'm actually infinite, everything's fine. And then people come back and they live beautiful lives because they realize that everything's fine on the other side, that they are meaningful, that they are a part, they are loved, and they're cherished, and that this is just a very self-realizing experience that they chose. And that is very empowering. I feel like, it's not that we're supposed to not remember that we chose to be here, because even if an angel showed up in front of me right now consciously without me being on any drugs and told me, you chose this, so like, I would be astonished, I would be inspired, it would probably inspire me for the rest of my life, it would trigger me in amazing ways. But it doesn't take away that my body has a nervous system and needs that will make me feel separate from other people in my
Yep.
experience. And so in essence, it's very good that we keep telling each other what I call, and others people call, the law of one. Like, every sentient being is allowed to know that they're one with God. And not only they have a right to know, is their responsibility to know. And I feel like we have been compartmentalized in that specific part of the information, so that people live these very disempowered, low-grade lives and give up the power for safety, and show up to these very low-grade, grinding lives, and keep them from fully being free. The thing is, if you are free, you do not play in the system the way most people. You do not show up to your plumbing job if you don't want to be a plumber anymore. You don't show up. You're not a slave anymore. You ask yourself what the fuck you want to do, and you go and you manifest it. And the world will be shaped very differently. There would not be an elite of 1%. It would be so different if everybody had time to tap in. But what's happened now is that everybody is now in this fad of raise your vibration, do more yoga, and that's happening. What's happening now is that more people are raising their vibration, their health vibration, and the veil is thinning. People are having more out-of-body experiences and meeting their angels and having these communications on the other side of the veil, and living to live it, to tell the story, living to tell the story, and to wake more people up. And that's what's happening to me.
And there's and to add to that, a lot of past life experiences and a lot of identity issues. And I'm going to just interject this for a second, because the first 100 pages of my current book are about the soul, and a lot of that comes from the Jewish faith. And there's a lot of soul research that was done in that period. So the idea is that, and so these numbers aren't specific, but just to give you an example. So let's say there were 10 billion souls created by God. Okay, there were a finite amount of souls created, and they were housed in a treasury called the Guff. Okay, this is Jewish canon. Now, what happens is a soul comes down from the Guff and inhabits a body. And at the moment that soul goes into the fetus, that moment is called the quickening. So the quickening is when the fetus is no longer just a biological thing, it is inhabited by a soul. So that person grows up, they die, they have the out-of-body experience, the tunnel of light, they go back up to the Guff, where they wait in a queue in the Guff until they're going to come down again. Okay, so think about this like an hourglass filled with 10 billion pieces of sand. Now, what's happened where we're at today in the world is right now where we're at is we're at 7.5 billion people on the planet. There are more people alive than have ever died. Okay, so if that tells you anything, right? The 7 signs for the Jewish end of the world, the 7th one is the first child born without a soul. So the whole thing that they're moving toward, this ticking clock, is that last soul leaving the guff. But what happens is every time someone dies, they're still going back up into the guff. So at a certain point, the hourglass only has 10 granules of sand left in it, and you're still turning it over, trying to turn it over quicker and quicker and quicker, and you can't, because there's all of these people that are living on the planet. So we're all set toward an end, right? So the interesting thing about it is that in the last 100 years, there have been more past life experiences than any other time in history.
Yes.
Now there were people in the Old West that talked about having memories of things, right? And even 50 years ago, you know, even in the 70s, there were a lot of people, yeah. So here's a point I want to make to you about the math of this, because the math doesn't lie in this, okay? So in the 70s, when science was really documenting why people had these past life experiences or an affinity towards something, like maybe you were a white guy living in Indiana and your room was filled with samurai stuff and you don't know why you have this interest in that, right? So the people 50 years ago were having past life experiences of lives they lived 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. People were in feudal Japan, or they were in Asia, they were in Europe, you know, like people had these memories of these far off times, right? Today, there's a 7-year-old child in Cincinnati, Ohio, with the memories of a fireman who died in the late 90s. Okay, so the span of time is getting shorter, which means
in between showing up.
Yes. So before, where there were only 1 billion people in the world, your soul was staying in the queue longer before it came back down, and your memories were from a life further back. And today, they're happening sooner. So
oh my gosh, I didn't think about that.
So to go with that method, and this is just a theory, because that's what my whole life is about, is making interesting theories. Today, people have more identity issues than ever before. So think about it like this. You're a girl who likes men, but you like to dress like a boy, and your identity issue is so convoluted, you don't know why.
It's because I've been all of it.
It's because you literally just lived your life as a man, and you've come back, remember, with your soul having, and the thing is, the soul is supposed to acquire this stuff. I'm supposed to know what it's like to be mother. I do think that's a total possibility.
I believe in that possibility so much. I mean, there's just too much. There's no way that you can't call it anything else but a past life regression or a past life remembrance, because I've seen so many, especially the children. There's just no way that a child can come up with the things and that the people might still be alive that he's contacting, and he remembers them, and he knows their lives, and he knows how he died. It's like, wow, I've seen a few videos of that, and I'm blown away with that. And I definitely have had my own weird experiences, past life regression experiences.
So I've put together this whole theory behind this. And I'm not trying to at all in this podcast try to single out anyone who has an identity issue. And I'm not trying to make light of it, any kind of fun of that. But a psychologist would want to take that down to some form of childhood trauma. They would try to science their way out of it and give you a realistic explanation. And sometimes that's not really necessarily what it's rooted in. It's rooted in the fact that I estimate that there's an average, I talked about this in the first book, but today, people that are alive today would have lived an average of 10 to 14 past lives if this theory is accurate, okay? Now that means you might have died young on one of those lives. You might have lived a really long time another. It's a sliding scale. You might have lived 8 times. You probably lived like 10 to 14 lifetimes, okay? So just kind of going back and doing a rough equation, I was able to calculate that. So the point is that now you're filled with a whole bunch of lifetimes, and you do have some masculine tendencies, and you do have some feminine tendencies. And there's probably I don't know, how the inner workings of this are. If you're if your soul is choosing who it goes to. There's a lot of theories that an angel is taking you and placing you somewhere, and that you're specifically put somewhere. I don't know if there's a soul that's lived 14 straight just female lives, or if you're supposed to be black, white, male, female, gay,
Right.
heterosexual. Maybe you're supposed to experience all those things in what your soul is supposed to do. But today, people are confused because they literally just live their life as someone else, and that's
That might be
making
it.
its way in. And the interesting thing is, oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
So I find that fascinating, in that as everything counts down toward the end, it all really starts to fall into place. And I always get in these arguments with people that like the theory of evolution, and I always trick them up on one simple fact, and that is the numbers. Okay, so I want you to think about this, because this will blow your mind. So in the 70s, the Earth's population was 1 billion people. Now, if you believe in the idea of evolution and that there's a continuous run of people, okay, and let's just say, for argument's sake, if you believe the long-term evolutionary people, where they're saying we lived 300,000 years ago, or the short-term evolutionary people, where they're saying it's only about 30,000 people, or 30,000 years ago, I should say, then I want you to think about the math. Since the 70s, our population went from 1 billion people to 7.5 billion people in 50 years. Now, what's the next 10 years going to look like after that? We're going to hit 10 billion really quick. And those 10 billion people are all going to have 2 kids. And by the middle of the century, we're looking at, 50 billion people on the planet. Our resources will be so stretched thin, there will be no way this planet can sustain us. Okay? It's impossible. So if you believe in evolution and you believe in that theory of population, right? Go back 300,000 years and tell me how many people we'd have on the planet.
Right.
The evolution did not happen like that. It wasn't as old as it was. And even though bones do deteriorate, bones can be preserved in certain aspects, but we're not finding people in the fossil record. We're not finding people in caves encased in mud. We're not finding evidence. And there's also laws about how people gather. And when humans gather, they create things. They build cities. They figure out what concrete is. They figure out technology and education. Where's our huge leaps and bounds of cities and technology that would prove that early man would evolve the same way that modern man would? It's not there. There's not even cemeteries. There's not even, show me where the billions of bodies are at, or some evidence to support that they were there, because people were still going to fuck the same way and they were still going to procreate. You have a podcast about it started with sex. This is totally what that is. If you ask me,
exactly.
People are going to procreate, and they're going to keep making babies, and you double your population quickly, and it keeps doubling. But where's all the early man at? They're gone. And even if there was a catastrophic disaster, there'd still be some record of all these people, because in 50 years, we have 7 billion more people. So think about that for a while, where it's at.
That's
I know this is a little, I love like throwing this stuff in, because you can't dispute the math. And the math, and that part of that works with the idea of how the souls are going to come back down quicker, why people have identity issues. It solves a whole lot of issues. And the thing is I know there's a troubled kid out there somewhere. Right now, somewhere in this country, there's a person so singular with a problem. He's going to be a black, gay, Jewish guy who's growing up in poverty someplace, like whose identity is so specific to him that he's troubled by it, and he's probably not only black and gay and a Jew, but he probably identifies as being a female and likes to dress as a female, and he's probably living in the South, and it's like he's so specific to how troubled this person is, he'll never know why. Unless
and the reason why he's troubled is because we do not have the conversation to validate that what he's feeling comes from that. Because if information wasn't compartmentalized, and if we could just tap in, we would get a lot of questions answered.
Yeah.
And that's the
so
thing.
I don't know if you. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, no, I was saying, so it was obviously, I was curious what you thought of my theory. I was hoping that you thought it, but if you think it's full of crap, I want you to tell me, because I
don't think
appreciate
it's
your
crap.
opinion.
I don't think it's crap. I think that there's a lot of truth in a lot of the stories that we've been told, these ancient stories. And there's just, for something to be called a holy book of our existence, our connection to source, to, you know, we kill wars in the name of God because there's truth in all of this, especially in numbers. And like you said, numbers don't lie. Like, what has ruled the earth is our stories and our books on God. And it's because there's truth in all of them. And they are all compartmentalized specifically so that we don't get the whole picture. And I think that's my conspiracy theorist thinking right there. But I do think that if we were to connect the dots on that fully and have access to all the information, we would not be suffering and disempowered so much. We'd be like, oh, I want to be a man, even though, like, that I'm in a female body, and that comes because I just lived this life that I can totally tap into by talking to a medium. Or no, I can just sit and meditate and eat this specific thing or smoke this thing, and oh, I just meet with my spirit guide and I get my answers, and oh, so that makes me, I can make a more well-informed decision on my identity instead of be totally confused, go through crazy surgeries, which I am not thinking, I'm not saying that's bad. Everybody should become or make themselves be whatever they feel the most comfortable in. But I wish we could, and we are stepping into that now, and even having this conversation allows that opportunity. We need to demand more information, and the ways that I would suggest, because you were saying, okay, in your next book, you want to talk about the optimization of your life, and starting with like the physical and the emotional and the mental and the spiritual. And I think that it all goes together, right? You need to start from childhood and empower the child with different rituals of management, self-management. Like, are you tapping in and asking yourself what you're feeling? And are you eating the healthiest foods? And are you sometimes going on fasting? Because fasting allows your body to let go of digestion, which puts you in a more meditative state. And all of those things can bring you closer to your cosmic experience of the burning bush, the oneness. And that way you can get your own answers and compare them with your neighbor's answers. And like, oh, it's similar because you went inside yourself as well during your meditative state. It is a practice of individual allowance. It's like everybody has to have the right to go inside. And if you don't have time because you're not eating, or you have to grind and pay rent, and nobody's teaching you these things, then you're essentially cutting yourself short, or the world, the system is cutting you short of the opportunity to get your own answers, instead of like go to church and have somebody else tell you how to worship God.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well,
it'll be a reinventing of our concept of worship and our concept of tapping in and taking care of ourselves. I think it is an inclusion of what we're doing now with, becoming a yogi and meditate and eat really healthy food, or fast sometimes, mixed with plant medicine and asking questions and asking your guides and your angels to show up. And I think that more and more people are going to have these out-of-body experiences that are going to reshape the way that we take care of ourselves and we shape the world.
Yeah. I think this is the perfect way to wrap this episode up. I think you couldn't have said it all, more beautiful here at the end. And I want to ask you back. I mean, I love having this conversation and this going back and forth in this kind of non-structured way.
We can talk about anything. I think that it all leads back to our conversation of, with ourselves. Like, every topic that we ever get into, I think will always lead back to.
We have a lot of good conversations. We can talk about the paranormal, UFOs, traumas, sex. We've covered everything really in our personal talks, and let's bring it to the show. Come back and be a regular guest for me if you want to.
I'm in, Todd. Whenever you want to have me back.
Because I know we could spend an hour and a half just on UFOs.
Yes.
So let's
yes,
tease. tease everyone out there that you'll come back and we'll do another one of these. And certainly I'd love to appear on your stuff or talk to you about whatever. So tell the listeners, how can people find you out there? You're on social media, you have a website, you have stuff.
Yes.
Tell everyone where you're at.
My website is changing. I'm redoing my AliceRabbit.com website. Was mostly photography, and I'm reinventing it. But yes, you can still find me through AliceRabbit.com or Alice Rabbit Shoots on Instagram, or Elise Avellan on Facebook. Elise is ELIS, and then Avellan, AVELLAN. Or you can find my IMDb, and from there you can go to Facebook. But yeah, I think the easiest way is through Instagram, Alice Rabbit Shoots. And yeah.
And you have I'm a fan of your podcast. You don't have a lot of episodes of It Started With Sex, but there's some on there, and I recommend anyone who's listening to go find that and listen to what she has to say, because it's always a lot of cool topics on there. And I'm going to plug that for you. I know you don't do many of them, but I hope you keep it going. And,
yeah, I mean, your encouragement helps. Everybody that is encouraging me around that, you know, I get inspired, and I'm just like, okay, I'm going to talk about it, you know, and then I do another episode. I kind of, you know, been gearing in and out of different things. That's kind of what I do, how I do in my life. I don't fully commit to anything specifically, any job, anything. I'm just like, this is what's coming out organically now. I'm going to do a few things. But yeah, I mean, your encouragement might make me make more episodes.
And there's no harm in having these separate channels to deliver specific types of messages. You know, there's no harm in that. So to create that type of system for yourself is a really good thing. So everyone go out and check out what she's doing out there. And it was a pleasure to have you on here today. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure talking with you. I feel like we've covered more through this conversation than just like more in depth. And it's just a pleasure to hear your perspective on things, and just, you're a brilliant mind. You're brilliant, and you're a great interviewer too. Thank you for your amazing questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. All right.
Thank you. Have an amazing time doing this.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Quest. Please be sure and rate and review this podcast. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org, or find us on social media for other unique content. And make sure to pick up a copy of the book that started a spiritual revolution, Metatomics, The Grand Design, available for sale online and at most major bookstores. Thanks for listening.